maybe some star architect, they're like a really famous chef in a famous restaurant. So they cooked in a kitchen, and then they served really nice, delicious, beautiful food to the guest. So then the guests eat the dinners, right? So that's kind of similar ideas as an architect, like a star architect. The customers, they won't join the cooking process. Then in our case, the things we're doing is a barbecue. It's not fancy at all. However, together with neighbor or like with everyone, volunteers, students, instructors, homeowners, together, we bring the food and then cook the food together and then eat it.
Welcome to the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast, a show about human environments and how they can be used as a force for good. Conversations that educate and inspire people looking for a different way to do real estate. I'm Neil Collins, and on today's show, I visit with Hiroko Yamamoto, an architecture professor at the University of Utah, and two of her students, Maya Tashi and Tom McKean. On this episode, we talk about the unique program called DesignBuildUTAH at Bluff, where graduate students are immersed in a hands-on opportunity to design and build a full-scale work of architecture in collaboration with the Navajo people. To get into today's episode, I want to start off with a bit of a personal story about my experience in school. You see, I did not do very well academically for most of my life because I found it hard to relate to the academic subjects being taught out of the textbooks. As a result of this, my interest waned, my grades suffered, and my confidence was rock bottom. Now, I did well enough to get by, but the pattern even continued into college. You see, my undergraduate major in agriculture economics wasn't particularly interesting to me, and the closest that I really came to agriculture during that time was participating in the student rodeo when they let intoxicated college students ride bulls. It was a different story for my graduate school, however. I was fresh out of Peace Corps, and I found that the life experiences that I had had abroad deepened my understanding and increased my appetite for study. That go round, I did extremely well academically, and I was fortunate to attend a graduate school where I spent 1 year on campus in an academic setting, and the next year I spent working abroad, working on a project in India before coming back and presenting a capstone thesis paper. The learning that took place as a result of this experiential learning was off the charts, and it made for a truly unforgettable experience that has formed who I am as a person and the work that I do today. This is why I was so excited to learn about the Design Build Bluff program. I couldn't believe that there was an architecture program out there where students have the opportunity to work with the Navajo Nation to design and build community projects like homes or community buildings over the course of 6 months. The program is located in the remote Bluff, Utah area, where the Navajo Housing Authority says that over half the reservation structures are dilapidated or require serious repairs. And 30% of these homes are without access to public water. The program emphasizes the design and construction of homes using green build techniques such as passive solar, rainwater catchment, earth and plaster, rammed earth, straw bale construction, and materials salvaged from the landscape of the reservation itself. Design plans are formatted around donated and recycled materials such as lumber, windows, and doors that can all be easily maintained and sourced locally. As you'll hear, the projects are completed on a fairly modest cash budget, largely due to grant funding. This is the first time that we've had 3 guests on the show at one time, and I thought it was great to hear not just from Hiroko from the perspective of the instructor, but also from 2 students at the tail end of their 6-month-long experience. Hiroko, let's start here. Why don't you introduce what Design Build Utah at Bluff is? And then I really want to know what world you're coming from.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is Hiroko. Hi, everyone. Yes, first, our program, Design Build Utah at Bluff project. This is the architectural program, like a hands-on architecture program under the University of Utah. So then we are really focusing on hands-on experience as an educational program. So especially we are focusing on Navajo tribe. Around the Four Corner area, we are collaborating with local Diné communities together. With this local community or this local governments, we are collaborating together and design and build residential project for the Navajo people who we need. So we build a house once in a year. And then we're running this program about 20 years now. So yeah, that's kind of basic information about us. And about myself, I'm a Japanese. And then about these 10 years, I live in Bluff, Utah, which is very close from the Four Corner area in Utah side. So then, but originally I received all of my architecture educations in Japan. So I was a student, and then I learned about Japanese traditional architect, or like a shrine or all the traditional housing things in Japan. So then meeting local communities or actual craftsmanships, master carpenter, master plasterer, I met through my research when I was a student. And then I really interested in to use my hand too. I always admired all of the great work of master craftsmen. So that's why when I was a student, I joined a lot of hands-on experiences all over the world, in Asian country, in Europe, in Africa. So from everywhere, if someone introduced me some interesting workshops or hands-on workshops, I just float and then jumped into any a construction site or hands-on workshops. So that's how I learned, or how I loved to be an architect or as a designer. So now I'm after this decades later, I become an instructor, and then now the things I'm doing is I'm passing my experience or my knowledge to the next generation. So this is my passion, so that's kind of why I'm here now.
How did you originally find out about the Design Build at Bluff project?
Yes, actually, I'm running this program with my partner or my husband, Hiroko Yamamoto. And he was one of the students who took this course. About 20 years ago, we were friends with each other, and he took this course. And then after he graduated, he became a staff out here. So then, I working as an architect or construction supervisor in Japan at the time, but still, we keep conversation what each other what we doing, and then so then actually I entered a huge construction company. I was joined the building team for the skyscrapers in Tokyo. So lots of bigger buildings, bigger architecture. But then I really missing the hands-on experience. My hands is always really clean at the time. So I doing office work. Of course, I was most of the time I was on the construction site as a supervisor or as a manager. I really missing to use my hand or make my hand dirty. So then after a few years, I quit my job. And then I started to explore again in the world. So then finally I went to Europe again, or jump into another hands-on workshops as an instructor. So finally I arrived Utah. What's Atsushi doing? He was a friend at the time, but so then yes, this design build program it's really cool, and I really amazed this landscape around us. So that's kind of like why I decided to like move to United States and then jumped into the design builder, this program as a staff.
But because you're working with the Navajo Nation, how do you bring students into understanding cultural context and activities and reverence as well as like setting the pedagogical process of this is something very different than just reading in a textbook or out of a classroom. What is that process as an instructor for you?
Yes, actually, the biggest beneficial things is, or to understand these communities, I live in Bluff. So even I'm working for the University of Utah, so I live in this Four Corner area as one of the community member. So for example, my kids, I have two daughters together with us, and we have two daughters. But our kids, they go to the same elementary school with these Diné communities kids. So they're learning together, they're learning Navajo language too, or culture. So it's me like as a neighbor, kind of like we can prove our exist into the neighborhood or this community. We can understand these communities, or kind of like maybe slowly, it was really slow step, but they also kind of like trust us, like what we doing. So that's kind of like this, like relationship, continuing relationship, which is like the first, it's most important things to before I tell these community things to the students to be like one of the community member, which is really, I think it is really important. And then also for the students, they come from out of the Utah, but still like even the students who grow up Utah, maybe the reality in this like a Navajo Nation or indigenous culture is way different with theirs. So that's why at the beginning, before we start design work, we do like a design camp out here. The student came to here and then meet client, survey the site, or visit previous project. So this is the first step that the student did.
That's fantastic. That's so interesting that your entry point was to talk about being a neighbor and raising your kids there. And so maybe this is a good opportunity to talk to the students that are going through this. And we have Maya. Maya, why don't you introduce yourself and just who you are and where you come from?
Okay. My name's Maya Taki. I originally come from Bristol in England, and I came across this program by accident. I was due to graduate in the spring of 2020 when the pandemic hit, and I had a place where I did my undergrad to do my master's degree, but I was looking for something to do in the meantime whilst we were all stuck at home, and came across University of Utah and discovered their DesignBuildUTAH at Bluff. And in the UK, we don't have any experiences where we get to build and design and then build what we design. And so I went on a limb and I applied and got in and thought that this is a really different opportunity, but one that would give me, very selfishly, the ability to understand hands-on, what we as architects, future architects, will be required to do and ask of construction workers. And then also to exist in a community that I had no understanding of. From the UK, we don't have interactions necessarily with native populations. And so for me, it was discovering a new culture and what is important to them, and then trying to tailor and cater to their needs. Really, really appealed to me. I've had the opportunity in my life to travel to different parts of the world and really appreciate different ways of life, different foods, and trying to see value in what is different from my own experiences.
What was that conversation like with your family, where you said, look, I found this program, it's in Utah, of all places, and it's working with the Navajo Nation and doing design and building. What was their reception like for that?
So my mum was actually in the room with me when I was at actually an open evening on Zoom where they were talking about the ins and outs of the program. And she kind of looked at me and I looked at her, and we both seemed very excited. And my parents have been, fortunately for me, very supportive of whatever I've wanted to do with my life. And so they were apprehensive. It's obviously an economic challenge to take on a degree of this size, especially abroad. And so that was kind of the main factor was, can I afford this? And throw out some loans and decided to do that. And they have been really great in supporting me and really, really interested in what I'm doing. They're not from the construction industry, and so they find everything quite fascinating, which is really exciting to be able to share that with them as well.
How long have you guys been on site and kind of working? You're at the back end of the program, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah. Did you want to talk about it?
We've been designing since June.
May.
No, way earlier. Yeah, this summer we were designing, so starting in May, and then throughout the summer we iterated and came up with our schemes, and then at the very end of August we came down to Bluff and started construction pretty immediately in September, and have been working pretty nonstop.
And for those tuning in, we're recording this on December 8th. So they've been out there for a good 6 months now. But Tom, why don't you do the same thing? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about where you came from and what attracted you to the program as well?
Yeah. So my name's Tom McKean. I'm from Montana, and I originally studied wildlife biology and worked in the sciences for a while and in education, and started to get a little bit disillusioned with the work I was doing. I was working in a lab at the University of Utah, actually, and was spending a lot of days in a basement doing experiments, a basement of a lab doing experiments. And so I was feeling pretty down on the trajectory of my career. And I'd always been really interested in design and combining sort of the more empirical, methodical experience that I had in the sciences with design, and architecture is like I think a really good mesh of those two elements. And so I was already an employee of the University of Utah and applied to the architecture program, got in, and DesignBuildUTAH at Bluff was an obvious choice to enter into. And I've had a really great experience, like just diving headfirst into the world of architecture, world of construction. It's been like a very eye-opening experience, a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, but especially not having a background in architecture. So yeah, I've really, really enjoyed it.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that fire hose experience, because you've got not only the design and the architecture sensibilities, but now you're in a classroom that's outdoors. You're doing construction. Like, help paint the picture for me of maybe whenever you arrived, like what that's like as your journey has progressed over the last 6 months.
Yeah, well, in my work in the sciences and in education, I had the opportunity to do a lot of field work. So spending extended periods of time in the field. So that actually feels pretty natural to me. The lab experience was the unnatural experience where I was
out of the
stuck
basement
in one building. Yeah. So this like really immersive, extended sort of marathon like experience of being in the field with a small group of people for a long time is really fitting for me, and it's actually like the perfect classroom environment for me. And so I've had the opportunity to talk to my classmates about their experiences in their architecture undergrads, which is very different from my experience in my undergraduate degree, and talk to Atsushi and Hiroko about their experiences, which are also very different given the different contexts that they were educated in. And so I feel like I've gotten really lucky. I mean, we're all great friends here too. There's 8 students, and fortunately we've all gotten along through this whole time, and we all live in the same house. We all cook food together. So I've had every opportunity to bug everybody else about their experiences and just trying to glean as much as I can, because I do feel like I have a lot of catching up to do, but it is certainly turned into like a passion that I didn't know I could be so excited about the work I was doing I hadn't experienced that before. So finding that in architecture has been like really, really fortunate.
That's amazing. Maya, why don't you tell me about where you're at right now? This is really fun because these guys are tuning in with bright neon vest on and clearly a construction site. But yeah, paint the picture of where you are and what you've been working on.
Okay, so as Hiroko has mentioned, we're on the Navajo reservation. And so it being quite remote, there's not a lot of infrastructure out here. In fact, there's a negligible amount. And there's lots of little homes that are dotted around. But for the most part, we can have a pretty much a 360 view of the landscape, different mountain ranges, different colors. We've got lovely red sand on site, and it's just a beautiful place. We get a lot of visitors from horses and sheep and sometimes cows, and so that's been interesting. In fact, one time when the building was just a timber frame, it was quite open, and we came to site and found horse manure all scattered around inside the home, and so that was an interesting experience because typically construction sites are in more developed areas where there's protection and things are more secure in that sense. But right now we're sat in one of the bedrooms, so it's a 2-bedroom home, single story, and very much on a north, south, east, west grid axis. And that is one thing that's very important to the Navajo people, is that there's an east entrance, and so getting that square was important. But
why is that?
So I might mess this up. So
No.
And so the east symbolizes birth, and so their indigenous structures of hogans, yes, they only have an east entrance, and then you circulate clockwise, and so each point of the compass symbolizes a different point of life, and so north therefore symbolizes death and then goes back to birth, and so you have this circle of life aspect, which is something we really wanted to honor, and in fact probably required to honor, because the DNA people want their homes to be blessed, and if things aren't sound in their culture, that they just won't live here. And we do want to provide a home that honors them, and so this axis was very, very important for us to get right, and then to use as a design tool. Actually, we've had a lot of constraints on this site, but something that's come up, the phrase "constraints breed creativity," has been really, really true for us, because we are limited by time, we're limited by money, and different resources, and so kind of consolidating all of that was a challenge, but a really good one that was, I think, created a lot of interesting details that I think we're quite proud of.
I just wanted to add, we designed to these cultural constraints primarily because they're the priorities of our specific client. We try not to make too many assumptions about the Diné people as a whole. Obviously, no culture is a monolith, but we've tried to make an effort to meet at least weekly with our client to evaluate our decisions and check her priorities. So yeah, all of these cultural elements which might be indicative of Diné culture as a whole, but there are, this is a very different culture than any of us have grown up in or experienced, and so it's a unique cultural experience to sort of reevaluate priorities.
Yes.
Yeah, let's dive in more on that, because I'm really interested of how design comes together from different cultures, because it is a cultural practice, from how we orient to our streets and in the direction of our homes. But what are some of those other really interesting cultural pieces, even if it's through the lens of your client? Maybe it's really good to talk about who your client is. And
yes, maybe they can add more information about the client or from their experience. But at the first, again, like here on the Navajo Nation, all of the resources is too far. For example, like no hardware store, no lumber company, or no design firm, or of course, no construction company. So that's why all of the resources is too far, even grocery store. So that's why, as a program-wise, we really focusing on ease of build for now and the future. So especially, let's say, even like for us, we are instructor, but most of the like a participant to this program is non-skilled builders, right? And then also we require the homeowners to attend or to involve this program. So that's why almost majority of us, we are non-experienced builders. So for example, this time the homeowners, she's over 70. So of course, tough to work together with us. But that's why she joined the weekly meeting, or, as like a kind of non-sweat helping she doing now. But typically, we are asking the homeowner to involve our process together during the design or during the building term. So we want to learn together with students and the client. So then again, like as Maya said, we have like a really limited schedule. So we have to finish this construction in school semester. So in December, end of December, they will back to Salt Lake City, to University of Utah. So that's why like after we leave, so how the client can take over this house or how they can increase the engagement with new house. We try to provide not the gift to them. So together as a team, we want to together, and then they should have the ownership or engagement to the new home. So that's kind of like we are trying to through this entire the semesters. So that's kind of like it's me. So then, of course, the design wise, as Maya said, like east entrance, which is like really important items. But also, for example, like we using like a natural plaster, which is we using the local sand, which is like without buying the material. With this like a sand from the construction, we can use the sand as a construction material. It's free, but also it has a really beauty of the land. It represents beauty of the land, right? So sometimes the client, they don't know, like they, usually most of us, we don't know we can use these like a site things, like a site material into their like a housing material, right? So that's kind of like we try to inspire the local community or our homeowner. So your land is really beauty, or how we can represent their beauty of the land or culture. So another idea is also this time we are making the concrete countertop for kitchen. So that one is we just gather like a piece of the rocks around the project. So then the client lay out the rocks in before we pour the concrete. So then after we take out the mold, we can see the rocks. And then this piece of the land will be like a really beautiful finished material. So that's kind of like yes, as a designer, or we try to inspire these locals.
This is timber framed, and are you using more indigenous techniques, or is it more?
Not really, especially for the structure part. Again, like at here, it's not enough infrastructure, which is like a road is like a really off-road. So when we started the construction, the road is almost too sandy. We cannot carry any heavy-duty machine. So, for example, in the future, if the client won't need to maintenance the house, so what they can do, like a general 2x4, 2x6s, that's like they can get from any hardware store, not maybe nearby, but if couple hours drive, they can get such hardwares or numbers. So that's why we try like material wise, as when we selecting the material, we thinking is to get or something local or some donation things. So that's like a really 3 basic items that we are selecting. So that's why rather than timber framing or rather the traditional Navajo timber framing, we, as you can see in the back, we using the 2x4, 2x6s. But sometimes we are combining another like a traditional method together. But basically 2x4, 2x6, that's we using.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I think it's important to note too that I think it goes beyond like what people typically think of as a regional architecture. The home has elements that represent the landscape, but it factors in other regional elements like supply chain, economy, workforce, like all of these other elements that are regionally specific, but not often talked about in the context of regional architecture. So I think in that sense, like it produces like a much more specifically regional house or architecture because we can't source things from far away. It's not a possibility. The furthest materials I think we have are from Salt Lake City, from us driving back and forth. So yeah, I think that's an important element.
Or maybe additionally, for example, in Navajo culture, for example, like a family gathering is very important. So, however, our project is about 800 square footage. So that's like an average size that we can build with the students in 12 weeks long. So, however, it's limited, but still, like as their culture, they think it's so, of course, for everyone, but especially it's really important to family gather, eat together, or how they can keep in cool in the hot summer. So we are thinking like we can design like extended living space into the outside. For example, like this time they designed the big porch in the south side. So they can create this porch, create like enough shade in the summer. So the family, they can get like they can plan like a big family gathering at the outside as an extended living space at the outside, or even like there's outside oven, like arson oven outside. So kind of like outside dining space. So they can plan some like a big family gathering, eating together. So we also thinking what is important like events in their culture. So that's also one of the important elements we can focus on.
I love that you're bringing the culture in along with the constraints, letting the constraints guide creativity. What does it look like on the building side for electricity and water and waste? Like, how does that all come together with the design and the build?
Yeah, so that was always, one of the constraints. So it being a remote location, water and electricity don't actually get hooked up for a number of years, and it can take up to 10 years. So we have to, one, recognize that, and then two, create spaces that one can accommodate that in the future, but also in the meantime to be allowed or to be hooked up to maybe solar power or generators. And then in terms of water, one of the systems Tom and I are incorporating into the home is water catchment. And so trying to harvest the grey water on the site so that it can be used for vegetation and to water plants. And again, just to minimize waste, also looking at places to compost and different things like that, but also really try and minimize the need for active cooling systems and heating systems. And so we try to orient the spaces so that heat, especially in the winter, that we have these large south-facing windows that can allow heat to come in the low winter sun. And then we have concrete floors that will allow for absorption of that heat so it can radiate back into the space, to have limited windows on the north side so to allow or to minimize heat from escaping, and different elements.
Maybe you can explain about the greenhouse, how comfortable when you are arriving at like a freezing.
So the east entrance is, you first actually enter into a greenhouse which is attached to the home. The walls are timber frame, but instead of having cladding on the outside, it's polycarbonate. And so actually right now when we first enter and the sun is shining, it's in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice just to warm up in that space.
Yeah, the outside was still like 30 something, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, without any heating. So that's amazing.
And is that typical? Have you done greenhouse entrances and other designs there, or seen it in the community?
This is our second greenhouse. But again, the reason why we think the greenhouse is important is, again, like even the grocery store, that's too far. So entire this Navajo Nation, there's only 13 grocery store. So for grocery shopping, it's also take a day trip to get the groceries. So that's why we are designing the house, but also we would like to inspire, we would like to provide healthier lifestyle to the homeowners. So that's why with greenhouse or water catchment, so that's really important. That's we think.
That's so interesting. How do you think it'll fare with water catchment? Do you know the average annual rainfall?
That was part of our research back in May. There isn't a ton, but because it is such a remote place, when it does rain, there's not a lot of places for the rain to go. And so again, we don't want rain just to kind of collect in the ground where it is quickly absorbed sometimes. But yeah, it's not, you can't rely on that water source, but it is useful for watering plants.
As an animal.
Yeah. We've had some horses come and drink from some of the places we've stored water from on site, which is interesting.
Yeah, our client actually has sheep. So this site we're on is her family's sort of multi-generational sheep camp, which is where the name of the project actually comes from. Cache, meaning summer camp, where people would raise their sheep in the summer. And so one of our water catchment tanks is actually an agricultural trough. So water drains from the roof into this trough, and there are sheep and horses that graze freely, and cattle that graze freely through the area. So it's a spot where there can be interaction between these sheep, which sustain the lives of a lot of people here, and the house. And on the other side of the house, we have another agricultural trough, but that is a shape that can hold more water, can be used in different ways. So we've tried to accommodate sort of the important connection between our client and this space into design decisions like those.
Yeah. What are you doing for toilets? Is it compost toilets or latrine?
Now, yes, we so far we setting the temporary construction potty trailers outside. So, but for the future, we are also setting the general a water flush toilet here, but maybe they can use it for years later. So the first couple years, they still need to use the compost or outside toilet. So it's not actual compost, but yes, kind of outside toilet. So that's the one of the really general things in the Navajo Nation. So usually outside of the main house, they dig a deep hole and then using the toilet at the outside. So that's typical. So but
so you're building about a 800 square foot house. What do you think all in the cost of the house is going to end up being? And I'm going somewhere with this, but I'm really curious what that is.
You want to explain?
Okay. So we rely heavily on donations, be it monetarily or through materials and time. And so we work with the Utah Navajo Trust Fund
and that institute,
and the Navajo
Revitalization Fund,
Revitalization Fund, and the homeowners and Hiroko. They put together an application for funding, and there's a certain amount of money that they will donate. But overall, Hiroko knows all the numbers.
Yes. For example, this house will be the total cash expense will be 50,000, and then typically, our project, let's say 50,000 cash expense, which is supported with this a local funding. But then about 20,000 or 25,000 ish was the value of the donation. So then maybe as a total, it will be 75,000-ish as the value of this house. So it's kind of like maybe we can say it's really affordable house. And then because they are designer and they are builder, and then we try to we also focusing on the local things. So that's that's how we can save that cost.
Well, it's unbelievable to me as we look at projects from across the world, and there's this rallying cry from organizations like the International Living Future Institute to do a living building where you're building with materials that are close on site and local. They're saying, how do we not see waste streams, but how do we see circularity and to keep nutrients on site, and how do we harvest our own rainwater, and how do we have agriculture on site? These are all these petals that y'all are hitting if you look at something like a living building challenge. But so many people are saying, that either that's impossible, we can't build that way, that's not how our modern architecture comes together, or it's prohibitively expensive and we can't do that. And you're over here building for less than $100 a square foot to build a very unique place or home that's sited within a very particular context that's guided by constraints that they typically don't have a lot of disposable income, and there's very limited access to hardware stores or to grocery stores. And I think that's what's incredible is you can start to layer on top of, there's cultural context and there's environmental context and there's learning that's taking place, and it's a community effort. And I think that's truly incredible. So the last question I really have for you, Tom and Maya, is you've gone through a 6-month process. Tom, it sounds like you're new into the design world, but Maya, you've had academic training in this area. Where do you want to go from here? What? And it doesn't have to pertain to the experience that you're doing now, but what does your trajectory look like, and how do you want your career to come together?
Can I go first?
Sure. I think a lot of us have worked in architecture firms during the master's program, and certainly people who did architecture undergrads. Some have worked in architecture firms between that program and the master's program. So I think pretty much all of us have experienced working in sort of commercial architecture contexts. And one thing that this experience has opened my eyes to is the idea of public interest design, designing for a cause or designing for people over profit. And I just think it's a, given the context of the building and construction industry as a whole, issues with concentration of wealth through real estate and through, or just the lack of accessibility to homes for so many people. It's a dire need. And that gets me really excited. And I think a lot of us, maybe it speaks to the people who chose to do this program, because it's a huge investment of time and money and labor. And I just think programs like this or public interest design in general is really valuable. And I don't know how to, turn it into a career, but that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, follow your heart, and I think that it comes together. What about you, Maya? Are you headed back to Bristol, or are you staying stateside, and what does that career path look like?
So we graduate in May, and people keep asking me that question, and I go, good question.
Stop asking me that question.
I think for me, being out here has proven to me that I can go anywhere. And that's one, really scary, but two, kind of comforting that the world literally is my oyster. And so I think eventually I would like to go back home. I think having skills from being immersed in different cultures and the US being a different culture from mine as well, having these practices, I think is valuable to take home. And it's kind of interesting to contrast those two. But I think for me, somewhat similar to Tom, the idea of community in architecture for me is really important. I I'm a people person, and I really value working with people who care, be that the team I'm on, the people who I work with, and those clients. I think for me, having a team who are invested beyond any ulterior motive, for me is really important, because working with Kathy, this is going to be her home. And so she does care about what that will be like for her, and we getting to know her are invested in her well-being as well. I think that is something for me that I would like to continue on doing, whether that be in a public interest domain, or in your more typical architecture setup, firm setup. I'm not 100% sure. I just would really like to work with people who care about the end product and the experience of using the spaces that are created.
Yeah.
Yes, again, like this program is like mainly this is not the service program to the DNA communities. So this is an educational program, right? So that's why one of the main concepts for this program is how we can bring up the student professionals with real site, real client, real budget. So that's why I think, in these 6 months, they learned a lot. And then I can see their confidence to be a professional designer or architect. So, and then especially as they mentioned, maybe through this experience, they are closed with actual social problems or social issues in the communities. So then they try to solving the problem with their professionals. So these professionals, of course, they already learned in a school. So undergrads or in a graduate school. So they already learned a lot in a classroom, in a studio. But then this opportunity, this opportunity provide them how their professional can close with real world. So I think this experience is provide the confidence, or it's their knowledge, or their knowledge gonna be really meaningful for their for their careers. So that's we totally believe it.
Yeah, I mean, what comes up for me is just to see the numbers around either Indigenous architects or even African American architects, and how so low, those numbers are so low. And what this program does is it kind of flips on its head of how do we create a more two-way street of learning and education, and using the site as a classroom and the community as a classroom.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's the sparks of hopefully we're entering into a new era where home is not commodity, and we can source education from all around.
Yes, maybe I think additionally, maybe I can add one more comment. So the things we are trying to do here or through this project is like a barbecue, so it's maybe I can say the architecture things is really similar enough with meals, dinners, or food. So then let's say maybe some star architect, they're like a really famous chef in a famous restaurant. So they cooked in a kitchen, and then they served really nice, delicious, beautiful food to the guest. So then the guests eat the dinners, right? So that's kind of similar ideas as an architect, like a star architect. The customers, they won't join the cooking process. Then in our case, the things we're doing is a barbecue. It's not fancy at all. However, together with neighbor or with everyone, volunteers, students, instructors, homeowners, together, we bring the food and then cook the food together and then eat it. So it's it's really try to open this opportunity to everyone. Everyone can join any process, and then even kids or elder or so they can join the cooking part, or even the selecting what they want to cook. They can bring their food and then cook it and then eat it together with fun conversation. So that's we want to do that here. So more like we think, of course, still we need a restaurant or, the chef that we need in the world. But the things up here is like a more barbecue. So our house is not fancy. So that's why we can be a really affordable housing. So, but as a barbecue wise, so far, this experience is really fun for everyone, or it's really meaningful, like a learning opportunity for everyone. So then again, like as a barbecue, maybe everyone will bring something they have in a leaflet or something they can get from the area, like a sand as a fresh local material. Maybe they can bring it, or some donated material that they won't use anymore. So such a leftover material they can bring, and then we can cook here and then eat here. So that's I want to try out here.
Hiroko, I love the barbecue metaphor, and I just got to say, like, I am so impressed and in admiration of what you and Atsushi have dedicated your lives to, and you're raising your kids there. And I know that you're going back and forth for a 7.5-hour journey to the school and then back to Bluff. And it's really inspiring to see people like yourself that are leading these programs. And I want to thank all three of you for taking your time out of the day to join me on this podcast. And I have so much admiration for what you're doing, and know that these experiences for you, Mai and Tom, are going to continue on to inform the path that you take, no matter where you go. And for those of you listening, I'm going to drop into our show notes a link where you can go. This does seem to be like it is heavily involving us, the larger community, towards how can we support these kinds of programs. It's amazing to see what we can do whenever we put some chips onto the table and to donate to really amazing projects. And I think that this one is certainly worthy. And if anybody wants to take a look at some of the pictures of what's going on there, we'll attach that in our show notes as well. But thank you all three for this really lovely hour spending with you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, before I let you go, I want to give a plug if you are interested in supporting the Design Build Bluff program through a donation. As you can hear, money that comes into this program can really go a long way. I also know that in-kind donations like wood, windows, plumbing, electrical materials, or tools can make a huge impact. If you are interested in contributing materials or volunteering, you can reach out directly to Hiroko at Hiroko, HIROKO, at arch.utah.edu. If you'd like to give a direct monetary donation than something like materials, then you can go through Angie Harris Roberts, and her email is Angie, ANGIE.Roberts, ROBERTS, at utah.edu. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. If you want to follow our work at Latitude, you can follow us on Instagram at latitude.regenerative.re, and mine is at I am Neil Collins. We inherently believe in the potential that comes from connecting value-aligned and purpose-driven people together in community. That's why I encourage you to join our mighty network and introduce yourself to the other people working across the globe to advance a more regenerative, resilient, and beautiful world. Here, we want to know what you're working on and what inspires you. Through this platform, you can attend live events, take courses provided by our podcast guests, and create connection with other people and businesses that share your same passion. To join, find the link in our show notes or visit our website at chooselatitude.com. If you'd like to support the show, please share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on your podcast app so that you always have the latest episode downloaded. Another way to support our regenerative field building is to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Positive ratings help attract amazing guests, and they can be the deciding factor for someone else to tune in and listen. And who knows, maybe this is the kind of motivation that it takes for them to finally decide to align their profession with their sustainable and regenerative values and become a positive force for good within their own community. This show was produced by myself and edited by Anthony Wallace and offered as a part of our work with Latitude Regenerative Real Estate.